Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we are now going to be diving into the play from some of the top quarterbacks selected of these past couple years. We're going to be just breaking down how they looked based off of week 3 in particular, handing out grades as for their results, but also just talking big picture as well, what we've seen from each of these top guys. So without further ado, of course, we have to get into this year's number 1 overall pick in Caleb Williams, and I have him coming in with a C-. Now, I think that it's a little bit of a mixed bag here for me. I do think that there was a lot of good out of Caleb's start here. You saw the arm talent, him starting to develop a relationship with Rome Odunze. Specifically, it was the 47-yard completion that he had with Odunze down the left sideline. He made a number of, high talent throws downfield, and specifically the throws downfield are sort of what I personally have been waiting to see from him. So some of those strikes are encouraging. There's another play as well that was taken off of the board, so ultimately, maybe I'm grasping at straws here, but I just want to see what Caleb is capable of. Right before the half, there's a play where he scrambles out to the left and on the run is able to make the throw downfield to DJ Moore for what was a pretty nice throw, wiped off of the board because of a holding penalty. But again, when we're so young in the careers of not just Caleb, but all of these quarterbacks that we're about to talk to, I am willing to, give a little bit more in terms of just looking outside of the box score of what can you show me that you're capable of. And I think that Caleb is capable of ton more than what he's given up to this point, but he is hurting himself with some of those, mental decisions himself. Threw a really bad interception immediately following that Odunze link up that I just specifically referenced as well, where he then tried to go back out to the sideline while he was under pressure and just did not have anywhere near the footing and arm strength that was necessary to make that throw. Ended up being a pretty easy interception for Jalen Jones of the Colts. But, all that being said, I think that we're just seeing the growing pains in front of him. He is in a pretty poor situation, I will add, where he was sacked 4 times. And, more times than not, I think that we just talked about this in the other segment that a lot of these quarterbacks are holding on to the ball too long. I think that Caleb has actually done a pretty good job learning from his mistakes at USC, specifically in week 1 against the Titans, that he is doing a better job of getting rid of the ball, just throwing it out of bounds when he feels that pressure coming. That I think we're seeing a lot of the developmental process there, but still a lot of bumps to his game. Doesn't help that the offense around him, the offensive line and the run game specifically, is what is struggling so much for him. So all in all here, I gave Caleb Williams a C-. He was definitely a below average quarterback this past weekend with 3 turnovers. But that being said, the arm talent is very clearly there, and it's starting to peek its way through the box score. You see him, I know, on 52 attempts, so, don't kill me on it, but he ends up throwing his first and second passing touchdowns in this game, over 300 yards for the first time in his career. I think there's a lot of positives moving forward, but I really couldn't get above a C- because of the mistakes that he made as well, that I'm sure he's going to continue to iron out. But the number 2 overall pick in Jayden Daniels, I mean, what a performance from him on Monday night against the Bengals. Incredibly exciting to watch, especially as we sort of have been sitting here watching some of these young guys of, who's going to take that next step, and no one really was answering the bell. Jayden has been the most solid, reliable young quarterback of these past couple of weeks, but we still really hadn't seen him attacking downfield all that much. And we talked about this yesterday as well, the fact that Cam Taylor-Britt was sort of calling Washington's offense a college offense, and that Daniels does a good job of operating that college offense. Well, Now we got to see the NFL aspects of how his game can translate, because he has the arm talent, and the 2 throws down the field to Terry McLaurin, and just the fact, in generally speaking here, you talk about someone who had over 50% of his completions from week 1 and week 2 at or below the line of scrimmage, and then coming into this game where he started pushing the ball downfield more, he had more completions of 10 plus yards than he did at that line of scrimmage, and he improved his efficiency, 21 of 23. I understand Bengals defense has its flaws, but again, Daniels was just entirely in control of this game. The one moment it seemed like he didn't have control over the game was on that 3rd and 7 with about 2.5 minutes left, and he delivered the touchdown strike to Terry McLaurin. Now, a little bit of hesitancy maybe at times, but overall still, I don't know what would have been an A-plus performance really for a rookie, if not for what Jayden Daniels was able to show on Monday night. So super encouraging there, and we have now a new frontrunner for the Rookie of the Year award. Bo Nix, thought it was a very solid performance overall for him, and this is somebody who it was, there were murmurs about whether or not he was capable of being a starting quarterback. There were people talking about, well, should the Broncos actually look to bench Bo Nix moving forward here and try and go with one of the veterans, more specifically Jarrett Stidham. And Nix was able to go on the road in this game into Tampa Bay, who had sort of been barreling through the first couple weeks, and just silence the doubters a little bit. Now, he wasn't elite by any means, 216 yards, but he was efficient, 25 of 36. He still does show that he has those legs under him. He scores a rushing touchdown in this game, that he was just able to help the Broncos actually sustain drives and look like a legitimate NFL offense. And as the pressure was heating up for Nix and for Sean Payton, he was able to sort of silence those doubts a little bit. Now again, not great necessarily. I was going back and forth between a B-, C+, because I do think he was an above-average quarterback. Didn't necessarily have the star power and the flashes like that, but I think that ultimately when you're talking about Bo Nix and what he needs to be for this Broncos team, and specifically for Sean Payton's offense, he just needs to not make mistakes, play the game that Payton is calling, and sort of ease their way into it. I thought this was a great step in the progression for Bo Nix. I gave him a B-. Now going to the class of 2023, CJ Stroud, who has been dynamite since the moment he stepped in the NFL. This was one of his weakest performances of his career up to this point. It is his second career game with multiple turnovers, or multiple interceptions in particular, but I still don't think he was that bad, honestly, and I thought that it was a lot more about the team around him than it was him himself. Now, 2 interceptions, not great. One of them was tipped at the line of scrimmage and fell into the hands of a linebacker. The other one was a clear misfire that he definitely deserves blame for, trying to attack downfield. But overall here, I think that he was sort of in a situation here going against a Brian Flores coach defense that understands there is very little run game. So we have the ability to understand that we just have to protect deep in the passing game and then occasionally throw those blitzes at you. That's a revamped defensive front. We saw Jonathan Grenard get home a couple times, and that was a very, very bad game from Houston's offensive line, which I think is a bit uncharacteristic. We talked about this on Monday. Fact that Laramie Tunsil, their star left tackle, had 5 penalties. I have a hard time imagining there are that many games of Tunsil reaching that number of flags. So Shaq Mason as well, he just got tossed by Grenard for one of those sacks as he, had a nice revenge game against his former team. That I don't know how much more Stroud really could have done in this game. 2.7 yards per carry from the rushing game. It's even worse if you take out the fact that Stroud was almost the leading rusher on 3 carries for 12 yards, that Akers was the only one with more of them, 9 for 21 there. So I'm maybe being too kind to CJ Stroud, but honestly, I couldn't go lower than a C here because I don't know how many quarterbacks would have been able to win that game. Sure, it looks bad when you end up getting blown out 34-7, but I still stand by Stroud. Even on some of the big plays, he had a big connection to Stephon Diggs at one point. It might have been right before the first half, but then it was an illegal formation penalty that got that pulled even further back to a 3rd and 20. I just feel like ultimately here, there's not a lot that you can ding Stroud for. I thought that he was pretty impressive throughout. Again, that second interception, that's a rough one, but I still think that I still have full confidence in Stroud, and I really don't think he played all that bad in this game. But if you disagree in the comments section, let me know why. Anthony Richardson, I have him sort of, in a lot of cases, the same way that I view Caleb Williams, who, the two faced off against each other in this game. Richardson, one less turnover where he had 2 as opposed to the 3 from Caleb Williams. But at the same time, I have a lot of the same gripes with him where I feel like the decision-making process for Richardson is something that I still feel like is far from refined. You look on, even as something simple as the first play of the game where he ends up holding onto the ball way too long on an RPO to the point where all of their linemen are at least 3 yards downfield, and then he decides to throw it for an illegal man downfield penalty. Things like that. He kind of got lucky, at least in my opinion. I've seen it be called both ways. Last thing I'm going to do is complain about the refs, especially in a game that I want Anthony Richardson to succeed. So, it's not like I have a dog in the fight necessarily. But I thought he got a little bit lucky on a fumble that could have been called. But eventually they said that forward progression had stopped it. I saw that called both ways this week. Once in the Patriots game where Brissett was whistled down. Once in the Chiefs game where Mahomes was wrapped up in the same way and he didn't get whistled down. So, listen, don't want to, speculate, play the hypothetical game. Richardson easily could have had an additional turnover in that game. But it's a lot of negative I just threw out there. The reality is you still do see the deep shot that he had to Alec Pierce once again for a big pickup. Now, unfortunately, he followed that up similar to how Caleb on one of his best plays of the game followed it up with an interception. That's what Anthony Richardson did with just a really bad decision on that 3rd down, scrambling out to his left and just tried to flip it into the end zone. Was tipped at the line of scrimmage. Either way, just a bad decision. Hold on to the ball, get down, and allow your team to score points. Can't be turning it over in the red zone like that. But, Richardson, he has a lot to iron out. He's still just 22 years old in his second season. I think that there is a lot of good buried in there. But again, just the decision-making process for him, I have been very underwhelmed with up to this point in the season. The accuracy still is something that is a little too inconsistent for me. But all things considered, he wasn't terrible. Definitely wasn't the worst quarterback I saw this week. So I gave him a C-. And then final quarterback here, Will Levis. This is maybe a little bit harsh. Even as I look at this in comparison, I maybe should have knocked Richardson a little bit further down, but so be it. Here we are. Let me know in the comment section if you disagree. Will Levis, it's not like he was terrible all the way throughout the game. What's so frustrating is that, making those costly mistakes on a regular basis and the fact that he still just hasn't gotten it through his head yet necessarily to be able to overcome those decisions, where you're looking at 3 turnovers in this game. Now, if you're an optimist, you can make the argument really only one of them was on his fault, which was the pick 6, and that's why I sort of ding him a little bit heavier for it, is because he continues to put points on the board for the opposing team and take points off of the board for his own team. And that's just something you cannot do as a quarterback. And on top of it, I don't feel like he has the ceiling of a Caleb Williams or Anthony Richardson from what we saw this past weekend. There are plays where Will Levis can look at times, all things considered, he's been pretty efficient when he isn't throwing interceptions. It's just that there are also a lot of the mistakes along the way that it's just not necessarily worth it in the same sense, Will Levis and Bo Nix are a little bit cut from the same cloth in my eyes in terms of I think that they are capable of being efficient game managers that do have capabilities with their legs, but through 3 weeks, we just continue to see Will Levis making these mistakes to the point where he doesn't even really give his team a chance to win necessarily. Of course, in that Bears game in week 1, he was I wouldn't say the sole reason, but he was one of the main reasons that his team lost then. So maybe I'm being slightly too harsh on Will Levis, but again, when I talk about Caleb having at least the redeeming qualities of taking those shots downfield, Anthony Richardson having the long ball to his game as well, plus just the pure strength and running ability that he has. I didn't even mention with Richardson because it's not something that comes up on the stat sheet. It's not something that you're really valuing with a quarterback, but the fact that, he was involved on that, I think it was a Jonathan Taylor touchdown where he sort of started the drive to sort of rugby scrum that play into the end zone. I just don't see those same redeeming qualities with Will Levis to the same degree. But if you disagree, again, let me know in the comments section why that is exactly. But we are now going to be diving into one of the other rookie quarterbacks that we've only gotten very minimal eyes on up to this point, and that is Drake May, as the New England Patriots are reportedly closing in on a time for May to make his starting quarterback debut soon. So we're going to talk about what that means, whether or not that's the right decision, and what we should expect from May if we do get the opportunity to see him. So we are going to dive into that, but before we do so, we're going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.